Thanks, Teresa. So I'm just going to tidy up a few chords here. So I felt like I was going to trip over that before. Okay. Okay. There it is. So someone that's just been like 50 years old, and I never get tired of. I never get tired, and it never get of hearing of God's goodness, and it never gets less precious. Do not let it get less precious to you ever. Ian and I were at we got asked up to North Pararua or Pararua Baptist, Hosanna Baptist Church. So by the way, hello Tyler. You've got one of our finest sitting beside you. So yeah, it's good to have you here. Be good to meet you later on. But this is up at your church, and so I was. We were ministering. Ian and I and Robert Norris also from St Albans, and in that there was a lady came up for ministry to the altar quite often during our, I think it was all day Saturday, there might have been a Friday night one, and then on Sunday morning she continually came up for prayer, and she told us, and I do apologise, I know it's a family thing, but she told us how she's got 9 cousins who lived in Wellington area. 7 of them took their life. There was her and her other cousin at the church. She suffered huge mental illness. I'm allowed to tell the story. She suffered huge mental illness and was put in a mental institution or a hospital. I'm not sure what we call them now, but went through all the shock treatment. She's a lady that's older than me. Went through horrendous shock treatment, this, that and everything else. She suffered schizophrenia, had a number of voices, and we prayed, and the deliverance was really gentle, and it was really beautiful to see her set free. I got back here to the office, and I don't work Mondays. We were probably travelling on Monday anyway. I came in on Tuesday morning, and there was a voice recording, and it was Greg. I just wanted to thank you for the time you spent with us and the ministry and so on. And I wanted to say I've had 24 hours of no voices, and this is the first 24 hours I've never had voices, and I've slept like a rock. And I wanted to tell you that I did not know what freedom felt like until this last 24 hours. Now I know what other people talk about and what other people experience. God is so good. And even if it doesn't last, I know I can still receive it, that there is a continual hope. And as far as I know, I haven't heard back from her. I did ask her cousin later on how she's doing, and she said good. And so, because I see her cousin once a year. And so it never gets old. I mean, you can probably hear the emotion in my voice, and how long ago is that in? 7-8 years ago probably. And so don't ever let it get tired. Being set free, Jesus came to set the captives free. And that freedom, my goodness, when you know that sometimes to varying degrees we've been saved, some more than others. I knew with my drinking and the way I was living my life, it was going to be a short life. In fact, I got saved at 27 years old. It was so ingrained in me that I thought I'd live a short life that when I hit 60, I was kind of surprised. I remember before I got to 60 that I was thinking, well, that's not Christian. Is it, Maria? And it's like you get to that place where well, God, you've done the most amazing thing. You've brought something out of the mud. It says, brought me out of the miry clay, set my feet upon a rock. And that rock's Jesus. I'm gonna go on Acts 25 and settle myself down a little bit. Excuse me. So I'm going to read out a chapter, so just come with me if you can. And just a little bit of background, just a wee bit. This is Paul's trial before Festus. Felix sort of got the sack, really, and sent back to Rome because he'd been far too hard on the Jewish people when he settled a revolt. He did it really brutally, and when you do it too brutally for Rome, when Rome thinks that was a bit harsh, you know that went over the top a little bit. And the emperor that called him back was Nero. So when Nero thinks it's a bit harsh, and so Felix has been called back, and now there's a new proctor called Festus. Now, so Felix is out, Festus is in, and Festus is quite a politician, really. And out of it all, you'll probably see a parallel. Now, Pontius Pilate, they relate this to that both Pontius Pilate and Festus were more interested in the political power they could gain. And so to keep the Jews happy, to keep the authorities at bay, this is why he's looking at granting them favors. But as we go through the scripture, it's obvious the charges can't stick, and that they're not going to, there's no proof. And they've been arguing. Now, Paul's been here 2 years because Felix he's sort of got sick of trying to sort it out. You know what? There's no easy road. He's a Roman citizen. Can't just go and crucify him like I could if he was some other troublemaker. So he just left him in prison. And so Paul's been here this 2 years. So 3 days after arriving in the province, this is verse 1, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They requested Festus as a favor to them to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. That's really great when the church of the day is planning an ambush and that will just take him out. Festus answered, Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me, and if the man has done anything wrong, they can press charges against him there. After spending 8 or 10 days with them, Festus went down to Caesarea. The next day he convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. And when Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. They brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove them. Then Paul made his defense. I have done nothing wrong against the Jewish law or against the temple or against Caesar. Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges? Paul answered, I am now standing before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I've not done any wrong to the Jews, as you yourself, you know very well. It's quite a challenge to the proctor. I mean, if, however, I'm guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. And after Festus had conferred with his council, he declared, you have appealed to Caesar you will go. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days here, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, there's a man here whom Felix has left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them that it's not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced their accusers and have had any opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I'd expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus, who Paul claimed was alive. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters. So I asked if he would be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial there on these charges. But when Paul made his appeal to be held over to the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I'd like to hear this man myself. He replied, tomorrow you will hear him. And next Sunday, Ian will preach what he told him. That's the end of chapter 25. Isn't it? Is there more behind me? Can you put it back up? Oh, that's as far as I got. Sorry. Okay, well, Ian will clear the whole lot up. He'll clear up the end of 25. That's as far as I want to go anyway. So Felix is at a loss in how to judge such matters. He isn't fluent with Jewish beliefs. They're talking about a dead guy who Paul says is alive again. And so you can imagine like the controversy that Festus has got. And so he's leaving it. Now, Festus has got this problem, right, that they can't find any fault in him. They've got no proof. And he's appealed to Caesar because Festus doesn't want to let him go because he wants to keep the Jewish people happy. But now you're going to send someone from there all the way to Rome at Rome's expense to stand before Caesar, and for what? A non-guilty man that they've already decided isn't guilty. And it'll go on with that next week to prove that they're at a loss. They even say if he hadn't appealed to Caesar, he would have been set free. But in it, if he is set free, remember there's an ambush waiting to kill him. They tried to kill him last time, but they were tipped off by his nephew, by Paul's nephew. Many times we can find ourselves in difficult situations, and I pray none of us have ever found ourselves or will find ourselves in such a difficult situation as this. But it does serve to show us that many, many times what we see is not what's really going on behind the scenes. It's not what God's seeing in our situation at all. Joy and I have been through a lot as a non-married couple, as a non-Christian couple. Sorry, hon. Did not mean to bring family into disrepute. I've shared this story before, and I can remember when Joy and I were so broke. It's a horrible feeling. Hands up if you've ever been in a place where you just cannot pay bills that are piling up. Yeah, a vast majority of us, yeah. And you just can't get there. And I can remember coming home one night from the sawmill. I used to work all hours, being down there, sharpening saws, doing whatever I could to make extra money, and we just could not pay the bills. And I can remember sitting at the dining table once at the point of tears, like not knowing how we're going to get through paying the bills that we've got in front of us. And we live in a small town, and these bills were for people in a small town, like at the service station or whatever it might be. And you want to uphold the name of Christ. You don't want to be the one who, and I can remember Adam, he was about 3 or 4 years old. He raced upstairs and he comes back down and he's got a handful of his pocket money. And he's like, Dad, you don't have to worry. I've got money. You can have my money. You can just have my money. It's all right. You don't have to worry. And so he puts these coins on the table. But something said to us, like if we had faith like a child, if we had faith like Adam, and a father who was beyond comprehension, that He will provide, that He promises He will provide. Like He said, Paul said, whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. It's a promise. David said something like in Psalm 37, I think it is, once I was young, now I am old, never have I seen the righteous starve nor beg for bread. It's a promise. If you're walking and you're trusting in Jesus, you don't have to be imprisoned by feeling we lack anything. Jesus has come and He has set us free. And a biblical freedom is freedom from sin. That is what truly binds us. That is what shuts us down. And we can get into all kinds of situations in our... I can hear in Teresa's story, I was listening to a guy, he's a psychologist, his name's Gabor Mate, and he does TED Talks and different things. He speaks from a spiritual point of view, but it may be a little bit universalistic at times, I think. I'm not sure. I haven't heard him testify about a personal faith in Jesus, but he quotes the Bible many times. And so did Jordan Peterson, and then became a Christian. So in this, he was saying that for addictions, it's not so much why the addiction, it's why the pain. And if you can go back to where the pain starts, you'll often find a release of the addiction and of once there's a healing in there. And he would say that for many people being raised, and see, so when I hear trauma, I think like World War II, you know, and because I was brought up by parents who came out of, they were kids during World War II. My grandfather fought in World War I, fought at Gallipoli and all those things, in Passchendaele, got a medal for extreme bravery in the field. That to me was trauma. But what that lady went through is valid trauma. As a child being left on the side of the road by your parent, and you don't even know if they're coming back, and all the different things that happen. And what this Gabor Mate says that often when children suffer something painful in their lives, is there anybody around who can help them nurture that pain and help them deal with it and follow through with it? It's interesting that Jimmy Carr, see, there's a thing where they think a lot of comedians are depressed, and some of them do suffer a bit of depression because, you know, they're people. But someone asked Jimmy Carr, it was a reporter, do you suffer depression? And he said, why do you ask that? Because you're a comedian. You're asking the wrong question. You need to ask the question, since you're a comedian, were your parents depressed like most comedians' parents were? Because as children, they learned how to deflect things with humor. It was a coping mechanism. And someone was so successful with it that it becomes, that coping mechanism has made them very wealthy. And so you can have an addiction to things because actually you've not really known how to deal with the trauma of life and things that come, and they can trigger you, and balls hitting together were triggering during a situation with this lady where she was experiencing vertigo. And it's interesting that he summed it up and he's saying, you know what, being a workaholic is a very powerful addiction for people in life, because actually it's something that brings success, so you get endorphins from the success, so you work harder. And him as a counsellor and psychologist, the pager would go, and he felt good because he was needed. The phone would go at all hours of the night. It felt good because he was needed. Now he knew he was going to burn out, and he knew his family was suffering, but he was stuck between the need to feel needed and knowing that it was going to burn out and cause damage in his family. But he explained that actually success doesn't have to be driven. And biblically, when he gets back to the Bible, knowing you're called, God asking you to do something, and you do it, you find purpose in life immediately, day by day. Therefore, success, you can sense success on day one of beginning your journey of walking with Jesus, of being set free. There's an author who wrote something, and a guy, his name's David Foster Wallace. I don't know much about him. He's not with us anymore. Died as a middle-aged man in about the 80s, I think. But he had this quote. Now, this is from a non-Christian. There is no such thing as not worshipping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. If you worship money and things, if they're where you receive real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. And when the time and age starts showing, you'll die 1,000,000 different deaths before they finally bury you. Worship power, you will feel weak and afraid, and you'll never need more power over others. And you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart. You'll end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is they are unconscious. They are default settings. That is captive. That is being captive. That's being captive to the flesh. It's being captive to the enemy's will. We'd understand that now. Timothy Keller's got a great book called Counterfeit Gods, and one of the lines he uses in it is that the human heart is an idol factory, and whatever we give our hearts to, we become a slave to. So we can become a slave to many of the things that we're striving for in life. But here's the good news. Romans 5:8. Sorry, I'm going to have to close up. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we're still sinners, Christ died for us. Like I heard this. I heard this explained, right? And I hope I get this right, and I hope I remember the numbers okay. If I take a piece of paper like that, that's the thickness of paper. You know how thick a bit of paper is, right? The sun is 93 million, and I believe it's miles, not kilometers, miles. So if that was kilometers, you'd be 150 million kilometers from Earth to the sun. And if that was represented by that distance by one piece of paper, the distance to the next closest star in the galaxy, you would need a pile of paper. It was quoted as 70 feet. That'd be about 22 meters high. That's how far away the next closest star is. If you went for the width of the galaxy, of our galaxy, the width and breadth of it, you would need a pile of paper that is hundreds of miles high. And remember, each sheet representing 93 million miles. And yet, in Hebrews, it says that God holds the galaxies and the stars in his hands. The message from that quote was that God is so much more than someone that just fixes our problems. When Joy and I started going out together, I lived in Rakaia Gorge. Joy's brother lived over the river on the Methven side, sort of diagonally across the Rakaia Gorge Bridge. I was upstream of the Rakaia Gorge Bridge at Terrace Downs, where that golf course is. That's where I was working on a farm when I met Joy. And I was 19 and Joy was 16. But she was quite an old 16 because she was one of... No, I mean this in the right way. Quite a mature 16. Does that work? No, probably not. She was beautiful. She is. You can't, it's my birthday. You can't sort me out at home. It's my birthday. But as a young kid growing up, I just wanted to go hunting. And I didn't have any family or any connections to take me hunting. And so when I became 18 years old, I'd shot into town and I bought myself a 270 rifle. It's a deer hunting rifle and scope and this and that and all that kind of stuff. And I even had to put it on tick, but I was like just looking for, but then hunting was a bit more technical, a bit harder than what I thought it was, because the helicopters had just about wiped everything out back then in the 70s. So I turned 18 in 1978, and most of it was wiped out. You were just doing lucky to find deer at least. And there was an old guy who lived down the road, and on Snowdon Station. And when I say old guy, I was 18 and he was about 40, so a lot older than me. Sorry. And but his name, well, I better leave his name out of it because he's passed away now. Well, we were very good friends, and but he was just known as a dedicated hunter, but he was also known as a hermit and really rude and had no social EQ. And I met him one night, and I got on really well with him. And he took me under his wing and took me out hunting. So I got my first pigs with this guy. I got the first time I went pig hunting, I got pigs. The first time I went deer hunting with him, I got a deer. And so he was my hero. He was everything I'd lived for, really. I just wanted to go hunting as a kid. And here I am, and I got this guy down the road has taken me, right? And then I meet Joy. A year later, I meet Joy. And you know what? I found that if I'm saying to Joy, do you want to go, do you want to go out? Do you want to go out? Do you want to go out? I mean, I was ecstatic when Joy said she'd come out with me. And, but I also realised that I live over there and you live here. And I can remember in a Mark IV Zephyr, that had a V8 motor in it. That took close to half my wage in petrol. I remember being paid $55 a week in the hand, and a light week on petrol was $17, so a third. And then when Joy's brother moved out to Lees Valley, I used to go out there hunting, and that's how I'd met Joy. So my petrol bill went up huge. But I had to make a choice that when I got to Oxford, am I going to spend time with Joy, or am I going to carry on and go out down the road to Lees Valley and keep on hunting? And I picked Joy. And I had to I had to make a choice about my friend up in Rakaia Gorge. And he understood that when I'd moved over here, that I'd moved over to be close to Joy, that was all fine. But then I became a Christian and I got delivered of alcohol. Well, at that, he went ballistic. He tore me apart. And this is my hero. And I can remember Joy said this was up at Lake Coleridge, and it was the opening of High Country Lakes that we always did, and it was always more than just fishing. It was a bit of a booze up and a this and a that and everything else. And I turn up with bottles of Coke. And that was just a shock to everybody. And I can remember Joy saying, we were married by then, because I was 27 at this point. So like 9 years had passed. And she was saying, are you going to make it? This is the first year I'd only been a Christian a few months, I think. Are you going to make it all right up there? And I said, I'll be fine. And I was fine. But I wasn't expecting this attack on me. And what I want to say out of this is that I wasn't aware I was making sacrifices. You've not been aware at times you're making sacrifices. Often what happens is you come up against life and you have to make a choice. And in those choices, you've got to decide whether God's in it. And if you don't think He's in it, then you have to ask Him, can you show me how you're in it? Because you've made a promise that you would never leave me or forsake me, that your eyes would never come off me. Well, I don't even know if you understand the situation I'm in. And in it, we don't make these sacrifices. There's a song, we're coming to the altar, we lay things down. There is very much times where we do that. We can lay down our addictions, lay down the sin we're struggling with, lay down so many things. But often love, when we love somebody, and that was the driving force for me. I loved joy more than I loved hunting. I loved joy more than I loved my hunting friends. Now, I thought about it this morning. If I tell this story, you know what? I could have had a whole lot of pig's tusks hanging on my fence going rotten by now, and I could have been probably a very single person. But instead, I have a beautiful wife, 4 beautiful kids. I've lost count of the grandchildren. Another one soon, very soon, before Christmas. And so, but that's the fruit, isn't it? That's the fruit of sacrificial love. God, who can hold the whole universe in His hand and sees us go amok, He comes to earth, and He bends. He comes down to us. He walks on earth as a man, not as God. Both, but in the first instance as man. And we discover who He is. And he lays down His life. And He takes upon Himself everything that was due us. And we fall in love with Him. He captivates our heart. Let God captivate your heart, and you will be free from sin. Trying to think of the theologian and bishop and all kinds of things. Was back in about 430, Augustine. He said once when he was a teenager that he went and he stole some apples off a pear tree with his friends. And he said that the weird thing was that he actually didn't like pears and he wasn't hungry. But he went and stole them anyway. Later on, when he looked back, it was his rebellion that his heart was captivated in sin, and he just wanted and needed to do something that he knew he wasn't allowed to do and didn't want to do. They stole the pears from a neighbor's garden and they fed them to somebody else's pigs for the thrill of it. Until he met Jesus. And he said he was captivated with the beauty of God, with the beauty of Jesus' love, with His presence over him. I'm just going to give this one piece of advice, right? Because people say, hey, God fills our hearts with love. You know, and does that seem like an empty promise at times? Does it feel like, well, I've heard it, but I don't always feel it? Here's the way to feel God's presence, okay? Begin to praise Him for all the things that He's done for you, that He came down from heaven and gave His life for you and has set you free from so many different things and has taught you how to love and open your heart to be loved. I often sit at home and I'm in complete awe of what God has done. in my life, once so lost, once so imprisoned, and set me free, and has me on a journey of being free completely. There's some things I stumble into. How did I get there? But God will set you free. That's His promise. He has promised, and He is a good, good God. Paul is sitting in prison, possibly feeling one of the freest people on the planet, knowing is in God's hands, because Jesus told him beforehand, when He appeared beside him just a few chapters ago, I'm taking you to Rome. Well, instead of having to walk there, he's got a free ride. And we're going to see how he gets there in the next few chapters. I just want to pray and finish. Father, I pray. I thank you for the words that have come through this morning. I thank you for the songs and the worship, Lord, that we had. I thank you for everything was pointing. You are a good God. We trust in you. We love you. We need you. Lord, you're the answer to everything. You're the answer in Ukraine right now. You're the answer in Israel right now. Jesus, you're the answer in Lebanon. Jesus, you're the answer. You are our answer for all things. Your love is limitless. Your favor is unfathomable. We surrender afresh to you, and we want to follow you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, guys. Sorry about keeping you so late. Right, it is hot because I don't think the exhaust fan's on. Bless your heaps.